The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is John Rodman Andrew Jr., nicknamed Rod. He was born on April 7th, 1965, and served in the Marine Corps during the First Persian Gulf War. He achieved the rank of colonel. We are recording this on April 4th, 2014. My name is Austin Mall. I'm conducting the interview. No relation. Dr. Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with a Clemson student and tell your story about life in the military and just sharing so that the story is logged forever.
I'm honored to do it.
You just start out by talking about life growing up. Where were you born and your family?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll just cover that quickly. I was born in '65 in Key West, Florida. My father was in the Navy at the time, and I was the firstborn, and grew up almost my entire childhood in Wilmington, North Carolina. And Dad was an engineer. Mom and Dad had me and a younger sister and a younger brother.
You mentioned your father was in the Navy. Would you consider yourself an Army brat or a Navy brat? Marine Corps.
Yeah, I don't remember Dad being in the Navy because he got out and went to graduate school in engineering before I was old enough to remember. But we had a family certainly had a military tradition on both sides, particularly my dad's side. And Dad was always to this day, very proud of his naval service. And he had his naval officer's sword on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. And as kids, we were not allowed to get up there and get that thing down unless he allowed us. And every now and then he would take the sword out of the scabbard and he would show it to us, and he would say, whichever one of you goes into the military will get to have my sword one day. And if more than one of you goes into the military, then the one who goes in the Navy will get this sword. And I just thought that was really cool. And Dad also had a lot of respect for the Marine Corps. I think that was his second favorite service. And it may be his first now since I've been in it so long. But I think that it was impressed on me at an early age. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of video games back then. What we did was some cheap little Atari thing. We played outside. We played war. We played sports. And I read. I read books. I read history books. And a lot of what I read was history of the Marines at Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima and Okinawa and Korea and Vietnam. And I was just like, the Marines are the toughest. They're the coolest. If I could ever be a Marine, then that would really be something. And as probably more personal information than you want to know, but growing up, I was always the smallest kid on the playground. I always had to prove myself, And looking back, I think that may have had an influence. Something inside said if I could ever make it as a U.S. Marine, then no one could ever question whether I was tough enough to belong anymore, including myself. So that sounds juvenile now, but I think that's the way young boys think a lot. So.
Good point. Now, moving into high school, and then looking at what you're going to do afterwards, what were some thoughts going through your heads, and then comparing that with your fellow classmates?
Well, I didn't know what I wanted to do long term in terms of career. I thought I'd go to NC State like Dad did and get a degree in civil engineering and become a land surveyor. That's one thought I had. I wasn't as good at math though as I was at English and history. But I tried to get into the Naval Academy so that I could get a commission in the Marine Corps, and I didn't get in. It was very tough to get in the Naval Academy, and I was a good student, but I wasn't that good. And I also got turned down medically. I had asthma as a kid, and the Marine Corps would not accept you if you had any symptoms of asthma after age 11. And so then I tried to get into Naval ROTC, which is another option to another path to a Marine commission. Got turned down for the scholarship Navy ROTC scholarship. I think probably both on academics and on asthma. Then I tried to get into a thing called the Platoon Leaders course. It's called PLC, which you would go to OCS for 2 summers while you were in college, and when you graduated with your degree, you were commissioned. I could have gotten into that, except once again, I couldn't pass the physical because they had documentation that I had asthma. And my last shot, really, the last commissioning program I really had a shot at was OCC, the Officer Candidate Course. And by that time, I was a senior in college. I'd been through the military entrance, the MEP station, where you got your physical. I've been through the same place like 3 or 4 times. And every time, I got through everything just fine until I got to the medical officer, the Navy captain, who was a doctor. And he looked at my file, and he checked, not qualified. And this was my last shot. And I'll never forget, I was a senior. I was at North Carolina, UNC. It snowed in Chapel Hill the night before I was supposed to drive over to Raleigh and be there at 6 a.m. And when you're from Wilmington, North Carolina, and it snows, it doesn't matter where you are. That's a huge deal. You get out and play in it. But I just had this fear that being in that cold air would get my lungs stirred up, and they might detect a little slight wheeze in my lungs in the physical. So everybody else was out playing in the snow in Chapel Hill, except for me that night. And I don't know what time I got up, but I know that I had to be in Raleigh at 6 o'clock. And it was normally a 35-minute drive. But Highway 54, which was the route from Chapel Hill to Raleigh, was completely iced over. And it's 4:30 in the morning, and I'm driving my little Chevy Chevette on an iced over road to Raleigh. I got there, got through the physical, finally got to go to the medical officer at the last station, and it's the same guy who had turned me down again and again. And this time I had all these letters, doctor's recommendations, all the waivers lined up. They had all the right wording in it. It was the magic bullet. And he checked qualified, and he handed it back to me. So I officially enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve. I signed a dotted line on February 13th, 1987. And the deal was I was going to finish my degree in May, and then they were going to send me to OCS in Quantico, Virginia. However, the numbers wax and wane. They've got too many officers coming in, not enough. And so they postponed our class to October. So I went to OCS in October 5th, 10 weeks, the 10 most challenging weeks of my life. I mean, I'll never forget it. Talk to my buddies to this day, some 27 years later, and we laugh about it now. Not much of it was funny at the time. But graduated and was commissioned December the 10th, 1987.
Mentally or physically, or probably both. A combination of both?
Both. It was toughest physical thing I ever went through. But also, a lot of the guys at OCS had been in ROTC or PLC at some time, and for whatever reason weren't able to complete it, and now they were at OCS. They at least knew how to shine their boots. They knew how to left face, right face. They knew basically what this was about. I just thought I was there to survive it. I didn't realize until early on that they actually want to weed out the people who they think can't be leaders, who don't understand what taking responsibility is all about, who can't make decisions under pressure. Like the 4th or 5th day we were there, they may be the candidate platoon commander for my platoon. And so I was in charge of everything the platoon did or didn't do, and they were evaluating me, and they would come out and say, Candidate Andrew, how many candidates are in your formation right now? And I was supposed to know how many were in sick bay, how many were on special details, how many were present. And they would come ask me that, and I had no clue. The word accountability I didn't know what it meant. And I was like, why are they asking me? Don't they know? Aren't they supposed to do that? So I got off to a rough start. And it was constant pressure. It was lack of sleep. It was constantly having your shortcomings pointed out to you and see if you were mature enough to take it and learn from it. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but we had huge attrition rate. Out of our company, I know no more than 60% graduated, and of the initial ones that were there, and I think it was less than 50%.
Wow.
And it was, OCS is not like enlisted boot camp. Enlisted boot camp, they want to mold everybody they have. If they can get everybody there and mold them into a good enlisted Marine, they're happy. OCS, they want to weed people out, who would be a failure in leading their fellow Marines. So they tried to weed us out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
After that, did you get your commission?
Yeah, I was commissioned December. Once again, I was put on inactive duty until April. I went back to Chapel Hill and worked on a landscaping crew for $4 an hour. I was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, an officer, and I was cutting grass. But in April, I reported back to the basic school that all Marine lieutenants go through after commissioning, back in Quantico, about 6 months. And then I was designated as an artillery officer and sent to the artillery basic officers course in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And that was about 5 months.
What came next? I mean,
Well,
what was life like, on that base in Oklahoma?
Yeah, just the wind never stopped blowing, and it was cold. And we had, by that time, we had, as second lieutenants in the Marine Corps, we had been socialized to the Marine Corps way. And life was tough. Our barracks should have been condemned in Quantico. We get to Fort Sill, and we got our own hotel room. We don't have to share it with a roommate. We have maid service. We have cable TV. And of course we were like, well, yeah, this is the sissy Army way, and we had an advantage over the Army lieutenants because their artillery course was their basic school. They had gone straight from commissioning to artillery school, where we had gone straight from commissioning through 6 months of the basic school, learning basically the basic knowledge a second lieutenant needed to have, especially in terms of leading infantry. So when we got there, we were so way ahead of the Army lieutenants, and we were in a class of maybe 200 some lieutenants, and I want to say 13 of us were Marines, and we blew it out of the water. We led the way. And they were good guys, and our senior Marine officers told us, said, look, don't talk down to these guys. I mean, you help them along, but don't look down your noses at them, because one day you're going to come back to the advanced artillery course as captains or majors, and they're going to know more artillery than you do, because you're going to go to an artillery unit, but then you're going to spend some time on embassy duty. You're going to spend some time at Parris Island as a series commander, and they're going to be in artillery the whole time. And they're smart guys, they're good guys, and you'll be learning from them when you come back. So
good.
We tried to take care of them, and they, for the most part, they kind of looked up to us, and we got along.
Good.
So, yeah.
Now, what happened next?
Well, then I was sent to Camp Lejeune, assigned to 2nd Marine Division, and the Artillery Regiment in 2nd Marine Division was 10th Marines, the 10th Marine Regiment. 5th Battalion, Battery R, Romeo Battery. So yeah, I joined the Marine Corps, and they sent me to Camp Lejeune, which was an hour away from where I grew up in Wilmington. So I was back home in eastern North Carolina, and I was in the unit for about a month before the battery commander got relieved. They had sent me off to a nuclear weapons training course in Norfolk, And while I was there, the battery had gone to the field and had a training exercise and shot a round out of the safety box that landed in the New River. And the battalion commander fired my battery commander, and we got a new guy coming in. So I came back and I thought, whoa, man, lots just happened while I was gone. But I was the fire direction officer for about a year. And the fire direction officer is the guy who's in charge of the, when a fire mission comes into the battery, he's got a fire direction center, and he's got a staff sergeant or a sergeant as the operations chief, 5 or 6 other Marines, and then you've got communication Marines who are manning the radios, antennas, all this stuff. And your job as the fire direction officer is to see that you get the fire mission, the data is computed correctly, the deflection and quadrant and powder charge for each gun, and it's sent down to the gun line quickly and accurately. And also to make a decision like, okay, we got this kind of target, how many rounds are we going to fire at it, what kind of type of ammunition are we going to use, and so forth. So I did that for about a year, and then I became the executive officer of the battery, which is the senior lieutenant in the battery. He's basically the second in command of the battery. And the executive officer kind of runs the battery day to day. I mean, the CO obviously sets the agenda, the overall course of what we're going to focus on, but the day-to-day running of the battery was up to the XO, obviously with the help of his staff, it's the battery gunnery sergeant and the NCOs and the other lieutenants. In the field or in combat, the job of the XO was to be in charge of the gun line, to make sure the guns got laid on the proper azimuth when you came into a new position and got set up to fire. I was in charge of logistics, fuel, ammo, maintenance, all the day-to-day things that had to keep going every day. And when the battery displaced from one position to another, so we moved 5-10 miles down the road, the CO would take a small advance party and reconnoiter a new position, select it, and kind of prepare the position for the main body to come in quickly and just get the guns laid and bam, be ready to shoot. The XO's job was to bring the main body later. So a lot of what I had to do was land navigation. I had to get the battery from point A to point B in a timely manner, on time. Yeah. So.
Now, taking on more responsibility, you're quote unquote, you're watching over your fellow people who you work with,
mm-hmm.
and what were some of the challenges in that? And people not always, and I'm sure it's very different. My perspective on leadership is much different from someone who's been exposed to the officer training that you have.
Yeah.
But in maintaining that order, any challenges or things, just the ability to follow orders?
Well, as a young lieutenant coming in, you have to understand the difference between pointing everybody in the right direction and micromanaging everything. First of all, you're new, and you've got these NCOs who have been in the Marine Corps 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 years. They know a lot of stuff, and they have experience in troop handling. You're responsible for everything that goes right or wrong, but you need to listen to them, and you need to learn to rely on them. I was very conscious of how much I did not know. And so I would listen, and I would watch, and I would listen to my NCO's advice. Now, just because they gave me advice didn't mean if it went wrong, it was their fault. It's still my fault. I still have to, every now and then I have to be smart enough to maybe not listen to this guy, listen to this guy instead. But they, if you have good NCOs and you make clear to them what the standards are, they'll make sure the Marines meet it. You know, that's one thing. That's one of the great things about the Marine Corps is that strong tradition of NCO leadership. You as an officer have to decide what's important and what standards will be held and won't be compromised, and those. And then there are cases, okay, well maybe we can have mercy on this particular Marine in this situation. But you set the overall tone and rely on your NCOs to get the job done, and they'll step up for you.
Good. Okay, what happened further in your career? Let's keep following down the path.
Well, I had been the XO for 2-3 months. And we had just changed over from the self-propelled 8-inch howitzer. I was telling you before, that's the howitzer. It runs on tracks. It looks like a tank to civilians. To a towed howitzer that was pulled by a truck. The Marine Corps was getting rid of all its old self-propelled howitzers. They were all World War II, Korean War vintage. They were real heavy. They weren't light and expeditionary enough for the Commandant at that time. So we were getting rid of them. We had just switched over. We had a different type of ammunition. We trained all the cannoneers on the new guns. And we had turned in all the old equipment, got the new equipment. And that was just complete when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And immediately we got the word, okay, 510 Romeo battery, you're going. And you're going as an 8-inch battery. So we had to switch everything back to being an 8-inch battery again. And so that was, you know, we had time to do that. But it was a transition. It was a lot of work. We got to Saudi Arabia in December, early to mid-December. I've got my diary here. If I want me to break it out, if it matters, we arrived at Al Jubail Airport December 18th. And we had a lot of our equipment with us, but we did not have our own howitzers and trucks. All of that came off the maritime prepositioning ships out in the Indian Ocean. So we had to be married up with our actual guns and trucks.
What were you expecting before you got to Saudi Arabia?
Well, this is the thing, Desert Storm was such an overwhelming victory at the operational level for Allied forces, but people forget at the time there was a lot of panic, especially in the media and the public. Oh, this is going to be a bloodbath, because Iraq had a very large, respectable army. They had Soviet equipment. I think, as far as myself and most of my fellow Marines, we knew that if they actually turned us loose and let us do what we could do, we could beat the Iraqis. Okay? It wasn't a matter of, we're going to lose. We knew we could win, unless we kind of did this kind of Vietnam thing where we kind of fought with one hand tied behind our back, and that. But we also really thought that we would take casualties. We didn't realize that casualties would be as light as they were. And for us as artillery, we knew that the Iraqis outnumbered us in artillery tubes by 6-1. And that they followed Soviet doctrine in the use of artillery, which was the number one target for artillery is the enemy's artillery. So, so we kind of, we didn't know exactly what to expect. We prepared for the terrain and the weather as much as we could. We knew that he had chemical weapons. So he did have chemical weapons at that time, and he had used them recently on his own citizens, so we prepared for that. But I've kind of explained this to others before. There was a lady that I knew very well who was just horrified that I was going to have to go to war. It's going to be terrible. And I was like, no, this is what we trained for. We went through all this training, all this time, and if we don't go, it's like studying for an exam you never take. We wanted to show what we could do. At the same time, little trepidation, and I've been asked before, were you ever scared of dying? And I can honestly say that I wasn't. And that's not, I'm not trying to sound all macho, brag or anything. I was really, really concerned that I would screw up. I would make a decision that got my Marines killed. I would fail as an officer. And that fear was far overrode any fear of dying. I just didn't think about that. I know my parents did. I know that now, in hindsight. And I feel sure that the vast majority of my fellow officers and NCOs felt the same way. That, they didn't want to let anybody down.
Yeah. Well, good. Now, when you were over there, you again got through all this training. Like you said, now it's time to actually put it to work.
Yeah.
How did it work out?
Well.
And what were your kind of missions? And again, only go into detail of things that you want to talk about.
Okay, sure. Yeah. It's not. First of all, I didn't see anything that was so traumatic or so gory that I have a hard time talking about it. And I have great respect for veterans who did. So I can be as complete as you want to. I remember those first several weeks. We moved several times. We finally got out of that base camp. We got married up with our gear, and we got to train a little bit, fire a few rounds, practice occupying a position and getting the guns laid for action. And a lot of times we sat there a lot. We sat there in the sand. Morale always went up whenever we got mail, which was not steady. We didn't get any mail from people we knew from home until we'd been there about 6 weeks. We got mail, that was a big morale boost, and we moved north because everybody knew we moved north, that meant we were closer to being in combat. And the sooner we got into combat, the sooner it would be over. And the sooner it was over, the sooner we could all go home and see our wives and girlfriends and, drink some cold beer and, and the whole 9 yards. But it was, the first action we had was the night of January 27th to 28th, 1991. It was an artillery raid. The idea was that we and another battery, which was Quebec battery, and another self-propelled battery, we would dash up close to the Kuwaiti border. And we went up about 25 kilometers at night, set up, and we didn't even have the whole battery with us. It was the whole idea was not to stay, but to set up quickly, fire a bunch of rounds, and then cut the wire from the fire direction center to the guns. Not roll it up, just cut it and get out. And the media was alerted to this, so we had an embedded reporter from the Boston Globe. We had a camera team from CNN and ABC News. And they were with us. And we pulled in, we told those reporters, we said, and listen, after that last round goes down range, we are leaving. And if you're not in the back of the Humvee that we set up for you, we're leaving you here because we're expecting counter battery fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So we pull in, we shot a battery 6, which means all 6 guns fired 6 rounds. Quebec battery, which had a different weapon system that you could load it faster, they shot a battery 12. And the target was an Iraqi motor pool and fuel dump. And we shot our rounds. Gun 6, the hydraulic loader rammer on gun 6 jammed, and so the section chief hand rammed these 200-pound projectiles into the breech himself. Just adrenaline kicked in, and he just slammed each one in. And they actually had rounds complete before the other guns. But we cut the wire, we got out of there, and I remember that night it was cold. I mean, the wind chill was in the teens. It was bitterly cold. But we flew out of there, and those reporters were back in that Humvee before the last round even fired. I mean, their eyes were as big as saucers. They didn't want to be left. And we dashed back down, and at first light we we pulled over and circled the wagons. We got reports that there were secondary explosions, so we hit some fuel and blew a bunch of stuff up. Those were the first rounds fired in combat by 2nd Marine Division since Okinawa in 1945. So that was really cool,
Yeah.
And then the reporters were interviewing us, and we were quoted in the Boston Globe and other newspapers. And I've got the Time magazine. The inside front cover of Time magazine has Gun 6 firing, and you can see the muzzle blast at night, and you can see the silhouette standing there, and that's my Gunnery Sergeant Foster, Battery Gunnery Sergeant. And one of the reporters was asking my buddy, Lieutenant Joe Schrader, she was interviewing him about it, and she said, well, how do you know you hit the target? And he said, well, man, we've got observers up there, but also I know how this battery shoots, and I know we hit the target. And she turned the microphone off and said, just off the record, all the Marines I've talked to in this battery just seem so conceited and so arrogant. Why is that? And he said, well, Joe didn't miss a beat. He said, well, ma'am, that's because they're Marines. He said, if you want to see some humility, you go down the road to that Army battery down there and you see some humility. She probably was still pretty disgusted at that attitude, but I thought it was funny. And so that was our first action. Again, big challenge for me was navigating through the desert. I had maps, of course. GPS had just come out, and the military had it. The civilian community didn't even have it yet. But not all of us had a GPS unit. My battery commander did, but I didn't. And sometimes there were well-defined roads, but more often there were not. And I had my driver. He knew how to read an odometer. He was a smart guy, and he and I could both convert the miles to kilometers on the map. And I would literally sit in my Hummer with an M2 compass, and believe it or not, the M2 compass works just fine surrounded by sitting in the middle of a metal Humvee.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, go this way, and tell me when you've gone 6.2 miles. Aye, sir. So we just I'd keep it like this. If he started veering to the left, I'd say, come back to the right a little bit. And then I said, okay, stop, now turn right, go east for 2.1 miles.
So you didn't rely too much on the GPS?
I didn't have one.
Okay.
I didn't rely on it at all. That's how I navigated.
Yeah.
And there were some, especially at night, there were some tricky situations. Let me see, because I'm going to get back to that later.
Yeah.
February the 21st, we finally moved to a point 6 kilometers southwest of the Kuwaiti border. If we had a map of Kuwait in front of us, you would see that the boundary between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait starts on the coast, Persian Gulf, and it goes west, directly west. Then it angles up to the northwest.
Okay.
And then it turns directly west again. Well, that angle, we call it the elbow. And the Pan-Arab forces, some Pan-Arab forces were right there on the coast. And then was 1st Marine Division. Then was 2nd Marine Division, that was us. And we were on the left flank of 2nd Marine Division. And we went up through that elbow. And to the left of us was the Army and the Brits and all that stuff. So we went up to our spot at the elbow on February 21st. We were in support of the 2nd Light Armored Infantry Battalion, and they received mortar fire, and we shot counter battery fire to suppress it, and we knocked out an Iraqi battery with our fire. But when we got to right up there to that spot at the border, the CO said, you may want to gather to circle the wagons when you get there. He was off somewhere else, and just kind of talked to the section chiefs and staff NCOs. And I knew that was a good idea, so we got there and I called up the section chiefs and staff NCOs, and these were all staff, they were long-serving Marines. But I said, all right, Kuwait is right there, and you can see it from here. We are now within range of Iraqi artillery. So tell the Marines from here on out, absolute noise discipline, absolute light discipline. No lights at night, no noise. This is it. This is what we came for. This is what we trained for. It's time to show what we got. And they were excited too. They've been around a lot, but they were like, "Hoorah, sir! Let's kick some ass. Let's go." So let's see. That was the 21st. The 22nd, 23rd, 20. Let's see. I guess it was the 23rd, the night of the 23rd to 24th. We went through the berm. They had there was a big berm that separated Kuwait from Saudi Arabia, and once you got past the berm, a kilometer or two was the Iraqi belt of defenses with mines and barbed wire and pits of burning oil, supposedly, all kinds of stuff. So we went through the berm, and that was the night we got one incoming round. And it was about a kilometer away. It was an airburst. You could just see this guy go poof. And I wasn't even looking at it. I was reading my map. I was trying to make sure I didn't get the battery lost, going through. So we got there, and the battery set up, and then my driver was also the battery ammo tech. We had to go back and find these LVSs, these gigantic ammo trucks, like 18-wheeler ammo trucks, and guide them into the battery position. And we spent all that night unloading the ammunition and distributing it along the gun line. Proper fuses, shells, powder, the right combinations. We also had to guide the LVSs back. So I was up all that night, the night before the ground war started. I mean, not the ground war. Well, yeah, the actual invasion. Okay. And about 06, the prep was supposed to start at 05:30, and they moved it back a few hours. About 06:30, CO says, "Hey, XO, why don't you try to get some shut-eye?" And I was like, "Roger that, sir." And I laid down in my sleeping bag underneath the tailgate of my Hummer. So when the prep actually started, and all our rounds started going down range, and the infantry and the tanks started going through the minefield, I was asleep. So as the whole thing kicked off, now I wasn't sleeping well, because when an 8-inch howitzer is firing like 50 yards away from you, the ground literally shakes. Because I heard it. I had my earplugs in. But fired all that day. Didn't really fire near as much. We had 1,000 rounds on the gun line, more ammo than I've ever seen in my life, and didn't need it. The Iraqis just folded a lot more quickly than anybody expected. So the 25th at 06:40 we departed to go through the minefield, and we found some abandoned Iraqi positions. I remember going down into a bunker at one time, and you could there was rice on the stove and it was still warm, and we saw some Iraqi equipment, and I found this ID of an Iraqi officer, military ID. I still got it. And I found a picture he had, probably a picture of his wife, I guess, and he had a book about the Reagans. It was in Arabic, but it had a picture of the Reagans on there. It was amazing, Nancy and Ronald Reagan. Anyway, that night, it was late in the afternoon of the 25th. We had to move again. And so it was going to be a night move. And the CO, before he took off for the advanced party, said, here's the grid that we're going to. He said, I'm going to kind of go up around here and go around all these obstacles and stuff. Or you can take the direct shot through this oil field. And since he had a GPS, it's probably easier for him to kind of wind around and stuff, but I determined I was going to use my same method. I was going to shoot an azimuth and go. So he left, and then we took off right before dusk. It was dark in no time. And this is the story where I've told this many times. We get into this oil field, and what I didn't realize, and maybe the CO was trying to tell me this, but I didn't. If he did, I didn't get it. There were these above ground pipelines, right? So I couldn't just go straight. We got channelized like a maze because of these pipelines. We couldn't drive through them, and we just went around and around and around. And you know, not too long after that, I wasn't sure within, say, 1,500 meters, 1.5 kilometers of where I actually was. And not only that, but these oil wells were all on fire, and they were shooting flames 90 feet, 100 feet into the air. And I had ammo trucks behind me. And then message is relayed to us that a truck from the headquarters battery of our battalion had run over a mine. So, and they gave us the grid where that was, and it was pretty close to where we were. And since I didn't know exactly where we were, I was trying to stay in tire tracks that I had seen, you know, to keep from hitting a mine. Well, at this point, you know, I don't know where I am. We got flames shooting up everywhere. There's a minefield somewhere around here. And I can't, the worst part is I can't go the direction I want to go in. So I said, all right, I'm going to have to swallow my pride here and call the CO and ask him to send back a guide vehicle to bring us in. So I went a little bit farther I got us a little bit farther away from the burning oil wells before I stopped the convoy. I couldn't reach him on the radio because I had a GRC 160 radio, and the lieutenant in the back of the convoy, the fire direction officer, he had a much more powerful radio called a Mark 110, and he could reach the CO. So I stopped the convoy. I walked all the way back down, you know, the vehicles, trucks. Marines were saying, "Hey, what's up, sir? What's going on?" I said, "Nothing. I just need to talk to Lieutenant McPeak for a minute." And Roger that, sir. So I didn't tell him. I was like, "Oh, we're lost. I'm going to send the CO to come help us." You know, I could have said that, and they might have even guessed that was what was going on, but they couldn't just say that. You know. So I went back there, and there was this other lieutenant, and he had the radio, and he goes, his Marines are all around him. He said, "Hey, XO, are we lost?" He was the kind of guy that didn't think before he said something a lot of times. He's a good guy, you know. But I said, "No, man, we're not lost." And I said, "But I need your radio. I need to talk to the CO for a minute." He said, "Are you sure? Because I think we should have turned left back there when you turn right." Now, I said, "Matt, shut up. We're not lost. Just give me the radio." "Are you sure? Because I think we're like." I said, "Matt, shut up and give me the blank radio." You know, I used language that I try not to use these days. But so he gave me the handset, and I walked away a few feet and called the CO, explained the situation. I said, "Can you send back a guide vehicle?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Negative, can't do that. We had a heck of a time getting here ourselves in this smoke and darkness, and afraid the guide vehicle would get lost." He said, "You can either stay there overnight and we can come get you in the morning, or you can try to make it on your own." And I'm like, okay, stay here. Romeo Battery fails to get to where it's supposed to be, fails to accomplish the mission because their XO, Lieutenant Andrew, got them lost. So I said, "No, we'll make it on our own." So I'm walking back at the front of the convoy, trying to look confident. I just
a little deflated,
And "What's up, sir?" I said, "Well, get back on the howitzers. We're getting ready to take off." Roger that. So I get into the vehicle. I tell my driver, I said, "I stay in these tracks. And at least they're going about in the direction I think they should be." I think it was northeast. I can't. It might have been northwest. But, one thing I didn't explain was he had night vision goggles, so he could see 10, 15 feet ahead. He could see beyond the hood of the Hummer. I didn't have night vision goggles because if I had worn them, I wouldn't be able to read the map right in front of me. So I read the map, and he told me what was out there, as much as he could see. So I said, stay in these tracks. So we're going along. I'm starting to feel a little better because the tracks are going in the general right direction. And then he said, sir, the tracks stop. I said, what do you mean they stop? He said, well, they just stop. And there's tracks that go off to the left and go off to the right, and the ones that we're in go 6 feet beyond that, and they stop. I said, well, it's like, did they like turn around? He said, I don't know, sir. They just kind of go straight and they stop. And I said, well, is there like a blown up vehicle at the end of the tracks? And no, sir. I'm like, so obviously we got to go left or right. But I wanted to go straight. That was the direction I wanted to go in. So he goes, which way, sir? And at that point, I finally, I was at the end of my own ability, and I knew it. And at that point, I said, God, I am not smart enough to get us out of this. If you will help me and tell me which way to go, I swear I'll give you all the credit, all the honor that comes from it. And he said again, which way, sir? And I swear I heard a voice. I mean, it was a small voice. It wasn't really so much audible, but it was clear. And it had 2 words. And they were, go right. I remember playing, go right. And so I looked over at him, and I, trying to sound very confident and self-assured, I said, go right. We went right. The tracks go along. I said, well, if we're in the right way, if this is right, they are going to start turning back to the northeast here pretty soon, and after 400 or 500 meters, we're going to see an abandoned oil well on the left side, because I could see a little dotted lines indicating an abandoned track, and I hoped that we were on it. And sure enough, that's what happened. After about 5-10 minutes, we saw it. We made it to the position. We pull up. First sergeant comes bounding up. Hey, sir, XO, you made it. Well, I tell you what, we sure were worried about you. And I said, yeah, I was kind of worried too. And he said, boy, I tell you what, we saw you come in, because we had a heck of a time ourselves. When we saw you come in, Captain Murphy is standing right beside me, and Captain Murphy says, Lieutenant Andrew has succeeded again. And I kind of grinned, you know. I was like, oh yeah, I did it. And then I went, you moron. You just told God that you would give him all the credit if he got you out of this, and he did. And I remember from that point on, I've tried to remind myself of all the times that I've given myself credit for good things that have happened to me, and I asked God for help many times in my life, and when He delivered me, I took the credit for myself. So that was a big experience there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
How does an experience like that, transfer over to, the rest of your time in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I don't know about, I guess I'll just conclude the narrative, the Kuwaiti narrative.
Okay.
I guess, when was it? After 100 hours exactly, President Bush declared Kuwait liberated and suspended all combat operations. At that point, we were sort of west-southwest of Kuwait City, very close to a suburb called Al-Jarrah. And so we stopped. And the Pan-Arab forces, who had been behind us the entire time, lurking to our rear, came across the front of our battery position, went into Kuwait City, because they wanted the Kuwaitis to be the one to liberate Kuwait, which I understand, that's fine. But they went in there and we shot the place up. They're shooting into the air, just completely undisciplined. And I did get a chance later to kind of drive through Al-Jarrah, and I do remember I had my driver with me and a wireman, and we were kind of going through the city, and it was all shot up. It was torn up. It was just a mess. But the Kuwaiti kids and Kuwaiti women would come running out. We love America, we love Bush, and waving Kuwaiti flag. If they had an American flag, they'd wave an American flag. And they're offering us stuff. They're trying to give us whatever they have. They have nothing. the Iraqis had taken everything they could. So that was really cool. You know, it really felt like we'd done something good.
I bet morale was pretty high after that for you and your fellow.
Yeah, it was. And the tough part, we did, at one point we came to set up this big vehicle. This Egyptian lieutenant colonel was in there, and he had dates and fruits, and he had all these servants bringing him food, and he offered us beer. I didn't think Muslims drank. He offered us beer, and I didn't feel right accepting it. We were, but we tried to be polite and accept his hospitality, and then we went on, and then from there on out, it was the tough part about morale was that you knew you had accomplished the mission. You just wanted to get home, and you didn't know when you were going to get home. So we finally got back in mid-April. So.
Did you interact with any other, officers from other countries or any other forces?
The one interaction I remember is that our howitzers were loaded up on what they call these low boys. They're kind of like a version, you've seen those trucks that carry cars. Yeah. It was such a long road march that they were just going to load these things up on, and these low boys were operated by Saudis. And I guess I wasn't a very good cultural diplomat because we were told we had to leave at a certain time. Well, I know we left, and most of the journey was at night, and we pulled over to rest for a little while, and then we were supposed to leave again at 0500, and the Saudi lieutenant who was in charge wouldn't wake up. The Saudi driver, none of the Saudi drivers, and so the Marines were like, "Hey, sir, these guys, they won't wake up." They told them it's time to leave, and so I took my flashlight and banged on the door of one of the trucks and said, "Hey, get up, we're leaving." And he's like, "Oh, get away from me!" He in Arabic has the Arabic version of whatever he was trying to tell me. And this Saudi lieutenant came up and said, "Lieutenant, let me handle it. Let me talk to him." And I guess it was a cultural thing. You tell a Marine to get moving and get on a job, and he does it. But that was the only interaction we had, and I didn't handle that very well. So.
There, you come back home. How was that transition, and then arriving back home?
Well, we flew out, and I've got the notes here. I've got the notes on that too. We left Jebel Naval Airport on 15 April 0200. We arrived in Bangor, Maine on the 15th at 1300 Eastern Time. And they told us that they were going to refuel. And we had half an hour to walk through the terminal and get a drink or something, get a snack. So we got off the plane and we go in the terminal, and there's all these people there. There's like people cheering. I get choked up now thinking about it. Old men, young girls, kids. They wanted us to autograph their T-shirts. They put lays around us, They were handing us drinks and handing us food, handing us beer, the whole 9 yards, slapping us on the back and saying "Welcome home," and it blew everybody away. And I found out later that they did that for every single flight that came through Bangor, Maine, every single unit. And we continued the rest of the way to Cherry Point, North Carolina, and then we got on the bus ride from Cherry Point to Camp Lejeune, and the entire 20-minute journey was yellow ribbons tied on every tree all the way down. And got to Camp Lejeune, where at our battalion headquarters, and there our families were and stuff. And it was really good. I was supposed to get out of the Marine Corps while we were over there. My enlistment was over, but I got obviously extended until the war was over, just like everybody else. And so we got back mid-April. There was a time of block leave, like half the battery goes on leave, the other half stays. I got the new guy, kind of snapped into my position. And then 1 June, I transferred to the reserves.
Okay.
And I came to Clemson to start my master's degree in history.
And you got your PhD here?
I got my master's here, but Clemson does not have a PhD program in history.
Okay.
So I went on to Georgia and got my PhD.
Now, what did you think of your time at Clemson? You came back. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot. College life is a little different when you've been off in the Marine Corps for 4 years. But it was still fun, and good professors, good colleagues in terms of fellow students. I loved Clemson. I would have stayed if they had a PhD program. And now here I am back. So.
Now you continue to stay on reserves. Is that something you've made a point to do?
Yeah. When I transferred to the nearest artillery unit, which was Mike Battery, 4th Battalion, 14th Marines in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And in the reserves, in the Marines, they very rarely would commission officers directly into the reserves. You went to active duty. So any officer in a reserve unit in the Marine Corps, just about, it's changing a little bit now, but has already, they're like a senior first lieutenant or a captain by the time they get to reserves. So you have captains doing lieutenant's jobs and majors doing captain's jobs until that kind of evens out. So my first job was I was a fire direction officer again. And after that, I was an executive officer again for a battery. Then I went to a different battery to be the executive officer down in Bessemer, Alabama. Then I came back to Mike Battery in 1997 as the battery commander. And by that point, I'd just been promoted to major. And that was my best time in the Marine Corps. It was just to have your own unit and it to be a good unit, good solid Marines you knew you could count on. That was just, it was great.
Now, why history?
I just always loved history as a kid. It's one of the things that got me into the Marine Corps, reading about the Marines. And when I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, I had a degree in history, and I knew I didn't want to make a career out of the Marine Corps, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just remembered that I always liked my history classes. So I said, well, I'll see if I can get into grad school and get a master's degree. And by the time I was halfway through with that, I had to figure out what was next. And well, I still like history. Maybe I'll go and get my PhD. Yeah. So that's just the way it worked out.
Now, you have a family. Could you describe, any parts of that family, your wife or your?
Yeah, I met Carmen while I was here. I was a grad student, and she was a senior. We got married a few months after I finished my master's here, and of course all that time I was still in reserves. We went down to Georgia, and we've got 3 girls now. One is 16, she's a high school senior. She's going to college next year, and one is in 9th grade, and another's in 5th.
Any chance they'll be solid orange, or your oldest daughter will be?
Well, I think the thing that Clemson doesn't do is they do not recruit kids from around here. They go to Daniel High School, and she was a good student. They didn't really recruit her too hard.
Okay.
So unfortunately she may end up at that
school
institution we may not name.
Yeah.
Or maybe at Winthrop.
Okay. Well, good for her. I'm sure.
Yeah, she'll
find her way, and it'll be good.
That's right. That's right.
That's good.
That's right.
Well, anything else you would like to add? I've enjoyed this conversation, but just the importance of, again, this is for Logging Stories and Library of Congress, but just a reflection on your service to this country and just the way people serve in general and serving their country, the importance that you gave it in your life.
Well, obviously it meant a lot to me. I had to fight to get in the Marine Corps. And I just feel blessed. people tell me sometimes, particularly like on Veterans Day or Memorial Day or the Marine Corps birthday, they say thanks for your service, and I really appreciate that. And at the same time, I feel very awkward because I don't feel like anybody should thank me. I feel like I'm the lucky one, that I got to be a United States Marine, and I can always say that. I grew a lot as a young man, as a young officer, and still growing as a more senior officer, I think. And God grew my relationship with Him. My family has always supported me, my extended family, my wife, my children, my colleagues here at Clemson. And it seems like to me, instead of thanking me for my service, they should say, like, man, you're lucky, no fair, you got to be a Marine. You got to serve your country as a United States Marine. And to be associated with all those good, solid guys that I never would have met otherwise, from different parts of the country, different ethnic groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds, would have never met them, got to know them, and developed a real camaraderie with them as we work to accomplish the same thing. I can't trade that. So I'm just very thankful, and our country is very often, Americans question whether we still have people who are willing to sacrifice for something larger, who can think of their buddy next to them before they think of themselves. And I think this last conflict, that question was answered, at least for the time being, and I hope it always stays that way.
Thank you very much, Colonel.
All right.
Dr. Andrew.
All right, thanks, Austin.